All right, everybody. I should be live, and I hope my audio is better for you this time as I've tried to make sure everything's working properly before this stream. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you for being here on a Monday night, and let's discuss some things that are happening in our country right now that we need to be very aware of. If you can let me know if you can hear me and see me, I would appreciate it. Besides that, thank you all so much. I always appreciate all the support I get here on Monday nights. And if you're here on the replay crew, thanks for checking back in. Because this information tonight I'm talking about regarding the fact that the CCP is funding all of this unrest that we're seeing happening in our country is very important because it lets you know that the war within our borders has already begun and it's just not being broadcast to us in the way that makes it more obvious. So 5x5 coming through. We've got Porky Prepper here. Good to see you. Jimmy of the Sea. Sherman Sales. Grisio Nemo says 5x4.9. I can live with that, okay? So I'm feeling good about tonight. I think we're all going to have a good time. And I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. And thanks to them, I can do live streams like this and try to get this information out to you while also getting better prepared. So a big thanks to Midway USA for always taking care of me. Billy Badass 411 the first. Hello to you as well. That was a hard one for me to get through. You got me. All right. So thanks so much for everyone checking in, letting me know that you can hear me and see me. Let's get this thing going. So first and foremost, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. This next generation style of warfare is not so overt. And in fact, it is very much covert. And what we're witnessing right now in our country is additional division and weakening of our country as time goes on, that's being funded by foreign adversaries. And I'm going to connect the dots for you tonight about how that's possible or exactly how that's happening. And you're going to see that some of these people here within our country who consider themselves American citizens are in fact working at the behest of our foreign adversaries, specifically the CCP or the Chinese Communist Party. So we have to make sure that we are aware of these things occurring, because if we're not paying attention, we're going to get blindsided. All right, so Mike H says the volume's low. I guess turn it up for me because that's the best I can do. I don't understand why this would be happening. But anyway, I'll just talk much louder because I can do that too. First and foremost, we have this situation that's occurring in New York City where a lot of this unrest is starting to unravel, and it's definitely a place that we need to be paying attention to regarding what's happening in our country, just because a lot of the funding and a lot of the interest from foreign entities is being focused in that region. So keep that in mind. Pro-Palestinian group shares map calling for intifada in New York City, okay? Now, this map was shared by this pro-Palestinian group, and it basically gave target locations of businesses and news organizations and offices that they felt had affiliations with people from Israel or people with Jewish descent or whatever it would be, okay? So this is an issue because we're getting maps put out to people within our country who might take them to an extreme measure, and that's something you should definitely be aware of. And then this is going to take us from this stage into the total full circle aspect as to how China's behind all of this, and that's going to be very eye-opening for some who aren't aware of these connections, and for those who already know, at least you know that we're still on the same path. A group supporting the Palestinian cause shared a map of New York City newsrooms, businesses, and landmark buildings calling for direct action to globalize intifada. The group, and intifada, by the way, is basically, it's the word for like the Palestinian uprising against the Israeli state, basically. So the group, within our lifetime, urged followers to target the offices of technology companies. This post has since been deleted, but lawmakers and Jewish leaders have criticized it, calling it dangerous and incitement to violence. The NYPD is deploying resources to protect public safety at the listed locations. The group also hosted a peaceful rally in Washington Square Park to demand an end to the current conflict. Now, part of the issue here is that not only are target maps being put out, but there's a lot of incitement of extremism, and you're seeing signs throughout a lot of these crowds that allude to things like, no matter what the cost, or by any means necessary, or things of that nature. And I don't know how you read into that, but I read into that as in whatever you got to do, and in my opinion, that can definitely mean some egregious things. So this is not just about, oh, this whole thing that's happened. It's not about that at all. We're talking about this because of the fact that this is being leveraged against us in the sense of a chaos campaign that's being funded by a foreign adversary, and a lot of people are falling directly for it. And unfortunately, it's very easy to get people motivated, especially when there's lots of financial backing. The other thing to keep in mind is that these organizations are also hand in hand with other organizations from other parts of the world that would be classified as terrorist organizations. So this is full frontal, but it just doesn't look that way at face value because nobody's connecting the dots for you in the media the same way as what we're going to try to do tonight, just because, I don't know, maybe it's just too much work or whatever it is that they're trying to avoid having to directly tell you, right? So, and that's my goal here. If you're new here, I'm just trying to provide information that we can prepare based on the fact of it existing and the threat level that it presents, okay? We have to prepare for these things to get worse, especially when we know that they're being funded. So, a group supporting the Palestinian cause shared a map of New York City newsrooms, businesses, and landmark buildings and called for direct action, which is not a good thing in my opinion. Okay, each of the locations on this map reflects the location of an office of an enemy of both the Palestinian people and colonized people all over the world. I have said this multiple times on this live stream, and I'm going to say it again. If you are in line with whatever these people might be saying, that's fine for you, I guess, but the problem that you don't understand about that is that they don't care who you are, right? If you're working in one of these businesses that happens to have ties to people that they don't like, but maybe you're just working a day job because, you know, you got to pay the bills and you got a family at home and you got hired at this place that you thought was a good paying job, well, guess what? You're on the target map now. So they don't care who you are. They're just going to go to these places that they mark as targets. I guess that's the best way I'm going to say it without crossing any lines, let's just say, okay? So, this is a problem. Today and beyond, these locations will be sites for popular mobilization in defense of our people. Today and beyond, aka as long as these maps are in circulation, which they deleted the post, but we know that they have ways of distributing this information. May this map serve as a call for every struggle to act in their own interest. As we do so, we uplift one another's struggles and free Palestine from the river to the sea, it continued, repeating the Palestine Liberation Organization mantra adopted by Hamas that calls for the eradication of Israel. Okay, so why is this an issue? Well, I mean, this is happening in our country. That's why it's an issue, okay? Like I said, this isn't about, oh, I support this or I support that. It's not about that at all. But I don't support putting out target maps about certain businesses or news organizations or locations based on the fact that you don't like the people who are associated with them and then innocent people get caught in the crosshairs. That's not, I'm not about that. This is America. We're not trying to have all this. That's just my opinion. So here's a image, and this is not the actual map, which you'll see here very shortly because I'm going to show it to you. But this map was circulating around, and I just wanted to give you at least the idea of it, but I didn't want to share the actual map just because I don't want to create a situation for anybody that maybe didn't need to exist in the first place. And like I said, that map was deleted by that organization, which means it's possible some people have access to it still, but not everyone. And I guess maybe limiting some of that access could be beneficial. I don't know. But this is what a lot of the organizations are putting out at this point, just because we don't necessarily want to feed it to anybody who might be looking for this, right? But it just gives you an idea of what it was they were publishing in order to get people to act, all right? And they are calling for direct action. So that might not sound like a big deal until you actually see that this actually had an effect and some of these places were targeted by protesters. Now, protesting is, you know, part of being in America, right? It's part of freedom of speech, and I can understand that. And if that's what they're doing, then protesting is one thing. But direct action and doing whatever is in your best interest, according to what that organization was saying, doesn't always equate to protesting based on someone's perspective. So we have to understand that this could be much worse than just protest, but so far that's what we've seen. I just want to jump in over here. Let's see. Pray for Peace says, honestly, how is it that we are so much smarter than the powers that be? Answer, we are good people that have been sold out. Well, here's the thing, Pray for Peace. It is fundamentally problematic to assume that the evil in the world is not smart. In fact, when they're playing, 40 chess or whatever it is they're up to, appearing incompetent or stupid is sometimes in their best benefit, right? So keep that in mind, because one of the easiest things for them to do is to appear dumb, so that way they don't have to take responsibility for the things that they're actually acting upon. Now, I'm glad everybody can still hear me here in the chat. I appreciate it. Nick, new to prepping. I bought 3 cases of freeze-dried food and 5 cases of blue can water. I also bought a Glock 19 with 3 extra mags and 500 rounds of Federal 9mm HST. Just started. Thoughts? Well, Nick, I think one thing is for sure, you're on the right track. Just keep going, okay? And don't let anything stop you, but at the same time, make sure you're doing everything in moderation. Don't bankrupt yourself to be prepared. Make sure you're doing everything with a plan, okay? So I would just say develop a plan and set goals for what you want your preps to look like by a certain point in time. It's a marathon, not a race. I know it always kind of feels like we might be running out of time, but we don't know when that time's gonna be. And really, when it comes down to it, learn skills, learn information, because you're going to have to adapt to a new environment no matter what happens that creates a situation where you're gonna actually tap into those preps. So keep that in mind, but thanks for sharing that and thanks for, making it happen. So now, this protest situation actually did lead to some of this activity they were hoping for, I'm sure. Pro-Palestine protesters disrupt Fox News and demand end to propaganda. Fox News, you can't hide, your lies cover up genocide, right? A group of pro-Palestine protesters entered the New York headquarters of Fox News' parent company on Friday, accusing the network of covering up genocide. The activist organization Answer Coalition organized a demonstration. Keep this in mind. Every one of these demonstrations is organized. They're not organic. They're not just a grassroots movement of people walking out their front door and saying, we got to do something, right? And walking down the street. They're organized, they're funded, and where the money comes from is where it gets really important for you to pay attention. But we're going to get there, I promise. I'm showing you the steps to get to that conclusion, right? The activist organization Answer Coalition organized a demonstration. The protesters gathered in the lobby of the News Corps building, waving Palestinian flags and holding a banner that read, Fox News lies, cover up genocide. Okay? The protesters clapped and chanted. Answer Coalition wrote on X that hundreds of people attended the protest, but a spokesperson for the New York Police Department told The Hill that there were only about 30 protesters. NYPD took 16 people into custody, the spokesperson said. And here is just a clip of those people in the News Corp building. Now, these news corporations were on that target map. They were part of that entire concept. It was businesses, news corporations, technology-related businesses, and it was just offices related to anybody who has any affiliation with anyone that might work with Israel or support Israel or even just have Jewish affiliation. So regardless, this is what we're seeing happening now. The mobilization is occurring, and these people aren't organically doing it. Some of them might be, okay, and we're going to talk about that here in just one second, but most of them are probably part of a larger equation. So this just shows that that activity, that map and that distribution of that call to action actually led to action. Now, it was not violent or anything like that, but it was, disruptive, which is what it was meant to be, and it was at a location that was part of that concept. I've been drinking coffee with 2 hands because it's cold out here where I'm at, and it feels good on my hands. So, now, Kevin Brown says they have leadership. Yeah, they sure do. And that's something we definitely have to be aware of, okay? Charles Wagner, love your neighbors. Yeah, well, Charles, I will say, most people, when you just walk outside and talk to them, are actually generally just good people who have a life, right? They have to work and they have to take care of their family and they have to mind their own business generally. So you're right, love your neighbors, because most of them are actually probably good people, and the media would love for you to forget that. So here's the thing. I said that these protests weren't organic. I said that this war wasn't necessarily organic, which is what we have to frame it as. Like I know some people have told me, Magic Pepper, you sound like a crazy person saying that we're in a war right now, and the news keeps telling me that, it's all the way over there in the Middle East, or it's all the way over there in Eastern Europe. So I don't understand where you're coming up with all this information, because next generation or 5th generation warfare doesn't look like it does in the movies, right? It doesn't look like Saving Private Ryan. Like, we're not going to see that type of warfare unless something crazy happens at some point in time, which is very likely now, but at the same time, we're already in it, so it'll just be an escalation. It won't actually be a start of anything. At least that's how I'm looking at it. So this is actually from ABC News. But I got this from KRV and Rural Radio, just because, these little stations tend to kind of focus on things that matter more to the people nearby, let's just say. So I do appreciate that. U.S. extremists exploit Israeli-Palestinian tensions with calls for violence and hate, say experts. What do you mean by that? Well, and this is from November 15th. These protests that might have some level of being organic are being hijacked. By who? Well, they're probably people that have connections that allow them to, I don't know, not work a job, whatever it might be, but let's look into it. New York. Extremists and bad faith actors have been hijacking the national debate in the United States around the Israel-Gaza war to call for violence, division, and recruitment of mainstream audiences, law enforcement experts say. They've been popping up at protests, using popularized language and spreading misinformation about the conflict online, according to researchers. Members of the Montanans in solidarity with Palestine say they were faced with this growing problem as they marched through the streets of Missoula on October 21st. This is in Montana. Like, this is not in California. This is not in New York. This is in Missoula, Montana. Okay? Members say they came across a group of roughly 20 masked protesters chanting and holding signage containing xenophobic and racist hate speech. The group, who members believe to be part of a local white supremacist hate group, shouted as much as they could, and we shouted them down. Brendan Work, one of the organizers of the pro-Palestinian group, told ABC News. Our message was that hatred of any kind was not acceptable in our movement and would never be, Work said. Interesting take, based on some of the things that have been said from their movement, of course. But anyway, he added that those being targeted by the group, including Jews and refugees, have been on the forefront of the struggle for Palestinian liberation. The group reportedly chanted "Hip Hip Hamas, Hip Hip Hezbollah" in celebration of the Middle Eastern terrorist groups that have been in combat with Israeli forces, according to local reports, and falsely thanked pro-Palestinian marchers for their support. Are you reading the same article as me? Because when you read this article from the mindset of these people being either collaborators or infiltrators, you start to see it from more than just what it is at face value. But of course, these people who are part of these organizations, like maybe Brendan Work, aren't looking at it like that. They can only see two colors, right? Black and white is all they have to work with. So for them, they're saying, these are the bad guys because they're saying things we don't like. And that's all they can see, right? But we're seeing it as, where did these people come from? Why are they instigating in this way? And what is their purpose, right? The confrontation with the group stoked fear in the pro-Palestinian protesters, as well as members of a local synagogue that the group had visited and protested earlier that day. The synagogue's president told ABC News, "I'm not sure who's doing what at this point in time, because from what I understand, pro-Palestinian groups just sent out a target map in New York City of businesses and news corporations and offices with certain affiliations because they don't like those people. But in Missoula, Montana, the opposite is happening, where the pro-Palestinian groups are upset that these people are supporting Hamas and Hezbollah. I'm very confused, but what I can tell you is that that's the entire point. This is the goal. It's to divide and weaken and cause confusion and chaos. And they're doing a very good job of it, because look at what they're talking about right now. They're so confused they don't even know what to say about it when they're being interviewed by a news corporation. So, the Montana incident is just one example of what experts are warning about regarding extremist groups and bad faith actors attempting to take advantage of the tensions. As tensions spike in the U.S. amid the conflict in the Middle East, experts say extremist groups and bad faith actors are attempting to take advantage of the tensions. When there is a major event in the United States, particularly an event with the reaction to is polarized, that is highly politicized, that evokes a passionate and even angry response by those who are impacted by these events, you can be assured that those who wish for the downfall of the United States are going to seek to exploit it. Who may want the downfall of the United States, you might ask? I'll let you think about that for a minute. So, this is where we are. And, we can go into some of these more detailed parts of this conversation, but I think you kind of understand what exactly we're talking about here at this point in time. So let's just say, okay, pro-Israel demonstrators have called for the immediate return of 239 hostages Israeli officials say were taken by Hamas in the terrorist attack, as well as American support for Israel in combating the rise in anti-Semitism around the world since October 7th. And on Tuesday, thousands of demonstrators from across the country gathered in Washington, D.C. in support of Israel. Experts say hate groups have been seen falsely claiming that they're part of these mainstream movements, using popular slogans alongside both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic messaging. You're seeing something that might be just in a different context, a pro-Palestinian statement, not anti-Semitic, but being co-opted and used by a violent extremist in support of their anti-Semitic ideology, said Elizabeth Newman, a former DHS official and ABC News contributor. Extremist groups, wait for it, as well as foreign agents, have different yet aligned goals for infiltrating the American political landscape, according to Cohen. What? No way. When it comes to foreign state actors, like those in Russia, their goal is to further destabilize the United States, to exasperate our political and societal fractures, to feed chaos and divert attention and support away from Ukraine. Oh, Cohen, you just couldn't do it, could you? You couldn't say who it actually is, right? So somebody's worried about their job. But interestingly enough, there's plenty of evidence as to why this is China and not Russia. But it's fine. At least we had the admission that foreign actors are actually involved here and that their whole goal is to further destabilization, which is what we've been talking about here for quite a while now. So I wanted to go ahead and go through that to give you, I guess, an idea as to what's going on in these movements. It's not just about who funds them. It's not just about what's creating the argument or anything else like that. It's also about what the goal is of the adversary, let's just say. And it's also about who we have to worry about here in our own borders, because there are a lot of bad actors here in our country right now who are more than willing to tear everything down and burn it to the ground. And in fact, they're working on that currently. And in many ways, they're winning this war, which is why that was the title of tonight's live stream. They're winning this war from the inside because the people who are supposed to stop this from happening are not doing it. And whether or not that means they're compromised or whether or not that means they're incompetent, it doesn't matter because it's not being stopped at this point in time. And we're going to talk about that tonight for why it's very obvious that that's the case, because it's very easy for them to do that and they're just not doing it. So let's see here. Hugh Junnett. Sitting on the west coast of Southern Oregon, watching Magic Prepper, counting my ammo and organizing my preps. Get it while it's here, folks. Well, I appreciate that that's what you're up to tonight, and I appreciate that you spend your time the same way that I like to as well. Okay? Now, I know everybody's got their own opinions as to who's at fault or who's doing this or that. I get it, okay? But what we need to focus on is the fact that this is what's happening, right? And if you know who the enemy is, you can more easily prepare for what they might do next. Okay? If you know for a fact that Russia is the #1 enemy of the United States and they have the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, there's a good chance that we might see a nuclear exchange, right? I know, there's not a good chance. Who knows? Maybe there is. But all I'm trying to say is that if you know China is the one funding all of this destabilization, then you know they're your enemy and you can expect more of the same moving forward, and you can expect it only to get worse. You can also expect them to make other moves that are more covert in order to establish more dominance here within our country. And it's not easy to fix, now is it? So, and what do I mean by that? Well, we also have evidence of people who are in public office probably being, at the very least, stupid, but also possibly compromised, okay? Dissent over U.S. policy in the Israel-Hamas war stirs unusual public protests from federal employees. The feds aren't happy now? I mean, I don't know who would ever have seen this coming, okay? Federal government workers from the State Department to NASA are circulating open letters demanding that President Joe Biden pursue a ceasefire in Israel's war against Hamas. Congressional staffers are picking up microphones in front of the Capitol, speaking out to condemn what they say is the silence of lawmakers about the toll on Palestinian civilians. As the deaths soar in Gaza, Biden and Congress are facing unusually public challenges from the inside over their support for Israel's offensive. Hundreds of staffers in the administration and on Capitol Hill are signing onto open letters, speaking to reporters and holding vigils, all in an effort to shift U.S. policy toward more urgent action to stem Palestinian casualties. Why would they be just so concerned with this, right? Why are they just so willing to put their name on it and push in order to get a change in policy? I don't know. I can't think of any other reason why some large group of federal employees would want to change any policies that might benefit somebody else. I have no idea. But anyway, I just want to go ahead and throw that out there, that these people are also part of this movement, we'll say. And it's problematic because they're working for the government, right? Which, look, just because you work for the government doesn't mean you like everything the government does. I completely understand that. But generally, you know, these people aren't so forward with their distaste of what it is that their own people are up to, especially regarding the fact that they're generally all on the same page in a lot of these different sectors, let's just say, at least at this current point in time. And I wonder if they have any connections to any, I don't know, foreign countries. Well, let's talk about that. And let's see here. Hugo, what we need to focus on is getting out to your local government and articulating to them why everything is falling apart. Here's the problem, Hugo, and I'm going to say this as best as I can. And I think everybody else, especially if you live in a rural environment, can kind of understand my frustration regarding some of these topics when it comes to that, right? The local government and the local level is where you can have the greatest effect, right? But you can only approach them with a, let's just call it a reasonable complaint or a reasonable concern. And what they consider reasonable is what they're going to operate with. So for me, if I come out to them and say, sleeper cells are here, and we have to be concerned about the fact that China might activate that at any point in time, and that the fentanyl is going to run through the entire town all of a sudden if they snap their fingers. And what are we going to do if that happens? They're going to look at me and be like, you know, we got to get over to that crosswalk because school's almost out. And we also, we got to plan on getting a new snowplow for this winter. So, you know, when we have, maybe if we have like a more credible threat or more verifiable information, like we'll see, you know, if there's something that we need to do, right? And I get that because like, what are they even really supposed to do? But it's very hard to convince your local government that some of these threats are even real because they're not seeing them on CNN or Fox News. Like it's not being given to them on a silver platter. So, for example, I reached out about the fact that all the fallout shelters in the area are completely debunked, right? They're like, or defunct. They're not debunked. They do exist, but they are defunct. And they are no longer usable as fallout shelters. But we could easily probably, at least get them back into operation status, maybe at a minimal level, because the risk of nuclear exchange is higher and higher every single day that these conflicts go on for, and we live in Minuteman missile territory. So I thought it's reasonable to say, maybe we should take a look at that, or, at least like decide where people should go if there is an event, right? Is there somewhere we can suggest, right? And radio silence. And you know why I got radio silence? Because nobody actually believes any of that could possibly happen. Even though we have all these missile silos in the ground for some reason. They're just there. They're never going to be used. What would we spend billions of dollars for in putting them in the ground if they were ever going to be used, right? Of course they're not going to be used. They're just there. And that's, nuclear weapons aren't going to be used. People just have them, right? So, I mean, that's just what it is. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Yeah, Mike H., just like in Jaws. Exactly, all right? You're going to need a bigger boat. So, all right. Let's talk about some of these groups, okay? Dun, dun, dun. Longtime Israeli policy foes are leading U.S. protests against Israel's action in Gaza. Who are they? We should know this. Why? Well, because anything that's this well organized and this well funded and has ties to foreign adversaries should be vetted and should be aired out for everyone to be aware of who might be associated with what. It's from the AP, and this article is from the 16th. As the Israel-Hamas war rages in Gaza, there's a bitter battle for public opinion flaring in the United States, with angry rallies on many college campuses and disruptive protests at prominent venues in several major cities. Among the catalysts are Palestinian and Jewish-led groups that have been active for years in opposing Israeli policies toward the Palestinians and who now demand a ceasefire in Gaza. They have clashed with pro-Israel groups in the past and are again now. The groups have roots in a movement known as BDS, which calls for the boycott, divestment, and sanction of Israel. That campaign generated heated rhetoric long before Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7th and Israel launched its counteroffensive. Advocates wrote op-eds for campus newspapers with appeals to protect Palestinian human rights, often accusing Israel of colonialism and racism. Okay. All this stuff, all these things. Who are the groups involved? That's what we really need to know. Okay. Jewish Voice for Peace. Jewish Voice for Peace, founded in 1996, describes itself as the largest progressive Jewish anti-Zionist organization in the world. It claims more than 300,000 supporters, has 1 million followers on X, formerly known as Twitter. God, why do they keep doing that? We get it. Okay, and maintains chapters on many U.S. college campuses. Its Columbia University chapter was suspended Friday for allegedly violating university policies on holding campus events. After the October 7th attack on Israel, Chicago-based Rabbi Brant Rosen, co-founder of JVP's Rabbinical Council, said he grieved for fellow Jews who were killed, yet maintained solidarity with Palestinians. The Anti-Defamation League, a Jewish advocacy group that frequently speaks out against anti-Semitism and extremism, assails JVP as radical anti-Israel and anti-Zionist activist group that advocates for the boycott of Israel and eradication of Zionism. In its 2021 federal tax returns, JVP reported revenue of nearly $2.9 million. It says the vast bulk of its income is from individual contributions. Just so you know, I might have looked into that just a little bit, and you guys can do some of your own research, but I'm going to give you a couple of them tonight that give you that exact CCP China connection, which is just great, right? Because that's why wouldn't we want these people funding and organizing people in our own country to cause disruption and chaos? But this particular group may have some connections with a certain family known as the Rothschilds. I don't know. I'm not sure how that works out. Let's just keep going, okay? So we have If Not Now, okay? Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to read all of these because that's going to be very boring. But there are some things that I want to kind of touch base on here. If Not Now. We're going to scroll down here. Okay? If Not Now, the Anti-Defamation League, for them who, they're all over the place. Like, I'm not invested in how they consider people to be or not be. But they have extreme criticism of the Israeli government and divisive rhetoric, some of which may be offensive to members of the mainstream Jewish community. Okay, great. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, okay? There are some other groups that have been investigated for some other things, like Students for Justice in Palestine has been on U.S. campuses for decades with frequent protests urging the liberation of Palestinians and boycotts against Israel. The loosely connected network, known as SJP, says it has more than 200 chapters across the U.S. and Canada. On its website, it says its mission is to empower, unify, and support student organizers as they push forward demands for Palestinian liberation and self-determination on their campuses. Last month, it joined calls for a national student walkout on college campuses. Okay, but here's the thing. The Brandeis move came after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' administration ordered state universities to ban the group, saying it illegally backs Hamas militants who attacked Israel. That effort is stalled amid legal wrangling. Paul Moore, a former U.S. Department of Education official from the Trump administration, wrote an op-ed this week calling on all colleges to ban the group. Meanwhile, attorneys general from 20 states wrote a letter this month mentioning SJP and calling on federal officials to investigate and remove foreign students who have espoused terrorist activity. Interesting. I'm sure that they're not really doing anything crazy there, right? Well, let's see. Multiple offshoots are also involved in the protests. American Muslims for Palestine, which has coordinated protest activities over the years with If Not Now, organized a die-in over the weekend in downtown Toledo, Ohio. Last month, the Virginia Attorney General's office announced an investigation into the group over allegations it used funds raised for impermissible purposes under state law, including benefiting or providing support to terrorist organizations. Queens College in Brooklyn is investigating the Muslim Student Association over some of its social media posts. At Brown University this month, 20 students with the group Brown U Jews for Ceasefire Now were arrested after refusing to leave a campus building during a sit-in. The group posted on X they were calling the university to promote immediate ceasefire and lasting peace. Okay, and even groups like UNICEF and Amnesty International have faced international scrutiny. In Scottsdale, Arizona, a presentation by a high school student group about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza prompted state public education chief Tom Horn to urge schools to kick the two international groups off of campus. So these groups have interesting ties and have definitely stirred up some hornet's nests, let's just say, right? But there's more to it. And the ties we're going to talk about from some other groups who are funding these other protests within major cities right now are directly related to China and the CCP. And when you go into those groups that we just discussed and you start looking at their funding, which is all public because these are nonprofit organizations for the most part, well, you get all kinds of interesting names to pop up. Of course, you get names like Soros. I said like the Rothschilds. You get all types of different names. But much of this money that's being transferred through these groups has had some kind of hands on it from the CCP at some point in time. Mike H, thanks so much for the $5. I really appreciate it. So, what would happen to our lives if the internet was actually shut down? Wouldn't it improve? Horses, no, it would not. And the reason I would say that is because at this point in time, the average American in our general population has become reliant on the internet for just about everything when it comes to their necessities, when it comes to their purchasing, and when it comes to their social life, when it comes to their entertainment, when it comes to just about everything. And because of that, without the existence of the internet, you would have mass panic. People would lose their minds because they would suddenly have no idea what to do. And yes, some of us might be able to easily adapt to that type of lifestyle because of how we were raised or what we were exposed to, but the majority of people will not. And those people will become very dangerous, and that's where the problem lies. So keep that in mind. I think that we can all do things individually that would be fine based on certain circumstances. Right? Oh, the grid goes down? I'd probably be okay. I've got a lot of stuff figured out when it comes to having my own power sources. Okay. Will my entire town be okay? Probably not the best. Will people start doing bad things because of that? I think so. Will that make my life more dangerous and less pleasant suddenly? 100%. So these are all things I try to keep in mind. Even if I'm going to be okay, that doesn't mean everyone else will, and those people are going to be the problem when it comes down to it. So let's go ahead. I do want to mention Genesis Gold Group does support the live streams here on the channel. I appreciate them doing that. And if you go to magicpeppergold.com, they can help you out, roll your retirement account into a gold-backed IRA. They can send you physical gold and silver. They can do all the things related to stabilizing your wealth with precious metals. So make sure you talk to them if you want any information about how all that stuff works. And one thing I will say about them is that they do not work with the CCP. They don't work with China, and a lot of gold groups do. So that is something you should keep in mind when you're trying to figure out who to work with. Just do your research, because even if you don't choose Genesis Gold Group, make sure you're not sending your money right to China, because that's a real thing. I'm just here to tell you that. But if you go to magicpeppergold.com, it does help the channel, and I'll put links in the description as well as in the pinned comment, and I really do thank them for supporting me over here. So let's talk about these direct ties to the CCP, which Genesis Gold Group does not have. All right. So, and I know, hey, Roaming Prepper, good to see you. Glad you're here. Polky, is there any decent place to buy used optics? Well, a couple places, there's always good old eBay, of course, but I also, I like to search for like blems or refurbished optics, because I don't care about blemishes generally. And even if the blemish is in the reticle, it depends on what part or like how it affects it. Like I've had blemished primary arms reticles before where the illumination just didn't fully fill out the reticle. No big deal. It didn't affect the optic at all. And I saved like $100 on it. So I would look for that in all honesty, but otherwise you have your usual places. Like local classifieds works pretty well for me. And then also like eBay and stuff. So just throwing that out there. Okay. And that's if you're talking about used, right? So American multi-millionaire couple funds Marxist group coordinating anti-Israel protests. This is where it gets interesting. And this is where you really need to kind of focus, okay? This shows direct links between China and these protests being organized and funded by China. And that should tell you that they have an interest in these protests existing. And if they have an interest in them existing, what is the purpose of that existence, right? These are the questions that you have to line up for yourself in order to get to the answer that we need to have, in the sense of how close are we to this getting worse or getting kinetic, or actually finding ourselves in maybe a conventional war of sorts, right? Like this is where we're heading. So here we go, all right? The People's Forum has been primarily funded by a left-wing multimillionaire tech mogul and his activist wife, who co-founded Code Pink, okay? A multimillionaire tech mogul and his wife are helping bankroll groups behind pro-Palestinian protests that have occurred in the wake of the October 7th terror attack by Hamas on Israel. Neville Roy Singham, a US-born entrepreneur who made millions after founding and selling an IT consulting firm called ThoughtWorks, and his wife Jody Evans, the co-founder of left-wing anti-war group Code Pink, have been the primary funders of a group called the People's Forum since 2017. According to a report by the Free Press's Francesca Block, the group bills itself as a movement incubator for working class and marginalized communities and nurtures the next generation of visionaries and organizers who believe that through collective action, a new world is possible. Okay? Sure. The People's Forum has played a role in organizing several pro-Palestine protests since Hamas's attack on October 7th, in which the terror group's members killed at least 1,200 Israelis and took over 200 hostages from southern Israel into Gaza. On the day of the Hamas attack, the group appeared to offer no condemnation of the terror group's actions and called for an end to U.S. aid to the Zionist occupation and tweeted images of posters stating, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," a slogan that has been criticized as being anti-Semitic and was cited in the House's censure of Rep. Rashida Tlaib from Michigan. One such protest occurred in New York City's Times Square the day after the attack on October 8th. A social media profile belonging to the People's Forum on X, formerly Twitter, why do we keep saying that, encouraged New Yorkers to go all out for Palestine. It also urged supporters to stand with the people of Palestine who have the right to resist apartheid, occupation, and oppression. It also organized Shut It Down for Palestine protests on November 4th to call for an end to U.S. support for Israel, and November 9th. At the latter protests, activists entered the lobby of the New York City headquarters of asset management giant BlackRock, which the People's Forum claimed shut down the company's office. Okay? So, trying to get to something here real quick. And, okay. Representative Mike Gallagher, Republican Wisconsin, who chairs the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the U.S. and Chinese Communist Party, wait, where did that come from? Told the Free Press, the Chinese Communist Party uses tools like Confucius Institutes on college campuses, TikTok's addictive algorithm, and organizations like those that Mr. Singham funds to divide and weaken America. What? Senator Marco Rubio, Republican Florida, sent a letter in August to Attorney General Merrick Garland calling for the Justice Department to investigate whether Singham and the groups he supports are violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act through their support of CCP organizations. It appears that organizations tied to Neville Roy Singham, a U.S. citizen, have been receiving direction from the CCP. Rubio wrote, Mr. Singham is the founder of ThoughtWorks, a Chicago-based software consultancy, and for many years promoted far-left causes. Mr. Singham reportedly created a dark money system that allows him to send funds to a number of far-left organizations. Among the groups Rubio requested the DOJ to investigate for potential FARA violations were the People's Forum, Dongsheng News, and Code Pink. Okay, so some people are aware of what's going on here. Okay, well, how far does this go? Okay, well, let's just see here, because this guy is a big part of this equation apparently, and I really kind of just want everyone to be aware of this whole situation. Like, these people are not on your side. I don't know what else to say. They took their wealth that they acquired due to living in a country like this one and used it against it immediately. And, this, like, the war is inside already. It's just not what you thought it was, right? So, let's see. I've got some really good chat going on here. Red Dawn Ready, does anyone own a freeze dryer? I still don't own one, to be honest with you. But I've heard great things. So the only thing you have to think and keep in mind, and this is my approach to it, and this is why I don't own one yet. And everyone needs to do what's best for them. But here's my only thought process on it right now. I don't personally produce much food, right? Eventually, I'm planning on producing food because I have the property to do it now. But I have to invest in order to get to the point where that's a productive property, okay? So I don't produce much food. And a good freeze dryer system is like, I don't know, like $3,000, let's say, right? For like a harvest rate. Okay. So how much food could I store for $3,000 versus how much I have to then spend in order to get that same amount of food out of that freeze dryer once I acquire it. And how much time and energy and labor goes into that process as well. So I think over a huge period of time, the freeze dryer can pay off very well. But in the initial, I could get $3,000 worth of freeze dried food and just have a whole lot of food stashed away that'll last forever. Or I could buy the freeze dryer and then have to start from zero and get to that point again. And at what point does that return on investment actually become more worth what I could have done in the beginning? That's the only way I'm looking at it. I have no negativity towards freeze dryers, and I will eventually get one. I just have to look at things through that lens. So I'm working on it. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, and you know, Red Dawn Ready, even with chickens and deer and everything else, like it's just still $3,000 worth of freeze dried food or $3,000 worth of just dry goods is a lot of food, right? A lot more than like a deer and some chickens. So that's all I was trying to say. But no, you're right. There's a reason why I still want one. I just have to look at it through that lens as of right now. Okay? So, and no, they haven't offered me like a free one or anything either. So I know someone's going to say that. I get that all the time. Why don't you just ask for a free one? I don't necessarily do that. Usually companies approach me, which I prefer just because it shows that there's an interest to actually work together rather than me feeling like, you know, I should leverage what I do here as a way to just get free stuff. Like that's, I don't know. Anyway, you get it. I'm sure you get it. Anyway. All right. These people, right? We're back to it. The People's Forum, based in Midtown Manhattan on 37th Street, has $13.6 million in total assets and employs 13 people. One of the rallies they organized was in New York City's Times Square, which took place on October 8th, before Israel had retaliated or counted its 1,400 dead. Okay? Hamas, the terror group, who have made clear that their aim is the destruction of Israel and death of Jewish people, murdered hundreds at a peaceful festival and took dozens of women and children, including Americans, hostage into Gaza. The People's Forum also organized Shut It Down for Palestine, November 4th and 9th, and they did the whole thing at BlackRock, right? Now, here's the thing. This guy definitely has ties. So, Singham made his money through his software consulting company, ThoughtWorks, that he launched in 1993 in Chicago. He sold it to a private equity firm, Apax Partners, for $785 million. In the same year, he started funding the People's Forum. As well as organizing the protests, which have been spewing anti-Israel and anti-Semitic rhetoric over the last 5 weeks, Singham, 69, runs a lavishly funded influence campaign that defends China and pushes its propaganda around the world, according to a New York Times investigation. Interesting. What do you mean? Well, I'm about to show you that. The report identified Singham, an avowed socialist, as a major backer of transatlantic activist collective No Cold War, as well as Code Pink, the U.S. anti-war group that once criticized China's rights abuses, but now parrots Chinese Communist Party talking points. I wonder if someone got compromised, or I wonder if someone was offered a sweet deal. I'm not really sure, but this dude says he's a socialist, so I'm not necessarily surprised. Singham's millions in funding, funneled through nondescript U.S. nonprofits, also back a liberal think tank in Massachusetts, a political party in South Africa, and news organizations in India and Brazil, according to the report. Okay? The groups in the network often appear to blend traditional progressive concerns such as climate change and racial justice, which is where they get you, which is where they get the, let's just say, less informed crowds that they're able to produce, because these things are very important to certain groups of people that they'll overlook everything else that it's tied to. With student pro-China talking points, including defending the detention of ethnic Uyghurs in Xinjiang and bashing pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. Because who could imagine democracy in Hong Kong? That's awful, right? So, what are these groups and why are they affiliated with China? Let's talk about it. No Cold War was the group that they said, goes around spreading pro-Chinese propaganda throughout the world. Well, here's their own website. Okay. A new Cold War against China is against the interests of humanity. We note the increasingly aggressive statements and actions being taken by the U.S. government in regard to China. These constitute a threat to world peace and are an obstacle to humanity successfully dealing with extremely serious common issues which confront it, such as climate change, control of pandemics, racist discrimination, and economic development. We therefore believe that any new Cold War would run entirely counter to the interests of humanity. Instead, we stand in favor of maximum global cooperation in order to tackle the enormous challenges we face as a species. We therefore call upon the U.S. to step back from this threat of a Cold War and also from other dangerous threats to world peace it is engaged in, including withdrawal from intermediate range nuclear forces agreement, withdrawal from the Paris Climate Change Accords, and its increasing disengagement from UN bodies. The U.S. should also stop pressuring other countries to adopt such dangerous positions. We support China and the U.S. basing their relations on mutual dialogue centering on the common issues which unite humanity. They are Chinese apologists 100%. And these same organizations are funding the protests that we're currently witnessing right now. Okay? What other organization was brought up in that revealing article? Well, the Code Pink one, which is ran by his wife, or partner, I believe they called her. Whatever. So, China is not our enemy. That seems counterintuitive to what this entire live stream is about. Oh well, let's see what they have to say. Join us in advocating for peace with China by taking action below. From sanctions to military expansion, the U.S. is heading towards a dangerous confrontation with China. Our campaign aims to stop this march towards war and redirect resources to cooperation that benefits people and the planet. Mounting hostilities are stopping us from addressing existential challenges like the climate crisis, as well as harming Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and people in the wider Asia-Pacific region, all caught in the crossfire due to escalating tensions. Propaganda is driving hate and intended to make China an enemy. We are at a pivot moment in history. The U.S. believes they can win a nuclear war against China and is preparing for war. One of those preparations is to manipulate the mind of U.S. citizens to support this war, which threatens our society as much as China and the rest of the world. Really? So China has no part in this entire equation. It's clearly only us. They're not doing anything, and they are definitely not an enemy. We are just making them an enemy. I guess I'm at fault at this. But also, China's funding this group. And this group is funding protests that are happening all over the country, and organizations that are handing out target maps of U.S. businesses and offices and organizations. Regardless of who they're affiliated with, these are American companies that we should not be okay with people targeting. Regardless of what that targeting means, because they weren't very clear in their statements, by the way. It wasn't like, go there and have a silent protest and sit in the lobby. That's not what they necessarily said. They said, whatever is in your best interest. And I'm not really sure how to translate that when it comes to disruption. So, this is funded by China. These groups have direct ties with China and the CCP. And they receive funding through China and the CCP. And they also have dark money channels that are specifically there in order to send money to organizations like what we're witnessing right now in order to destabilize our country and divide us. These protests and all this rhetoric about Israel and Palestine, it's some of the most divisive stuff we've seen. And they've tried everything, right? Like 2020, they had their go, right? And then we, of course, had the pandemic, and we had everything else, and we had the election cycle, right? And we're going to get to that here in just a second. But they're trying everything. Whatever will work. And right now, this was working really good, right? Which is why you should almost expect it to get worse, because it's accomplishing the mission at hand, which is to destabilize, divide, and weaken. So, let's see. Paladin 1, MREs, got to get the ham slice beef stew and 5 fingers of death. That's amazing. Yeah, MREs. And I will say this. If you are in need of MREs, just make sure you get them like before anything else major occurs. Because, I mean, that's just something that, militaries need. Meals ready to eat. It makes sense, right? I would rather just have them stashed away than have to worry about the fact that I don't have as many as I wanted or something. Roaming Prepper, I'm glad you made it. I know you're probably already gone, but I do appreciate you being here. Let's see. Rob Sinelli says, no Chinese ever called me deplorable. Well, not by their own tongue, but the people who are funded by them did. So keep that in mind. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about some other things that are happening here in the country that are related to this entire situation, okay? And this is also this is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed by this. So, and you should be too, because our country is we're just awful right now. It's not us. It's not you and me. I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about the people who actually get to like go around and pretending like they are important, right? What China's Xi gained from his Biden meeting, okay? When Chinese President Xi Jinping met executives for dinner on Wednesday night in San Francisco, he was greeted with not one, but 3 standing ovations from the U.S. business community. It was one of several public relations wins for the Chinese leader on his first trip in 6 years to the United States, where he and President Joe Biden reached agreements covering fentanyl, military communications, and artificial intelligence on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. Okay, first off, standing ovations. This isn't just like idiots on the street, right? Like this is business leaders who are in bed with these people too, right? Like, yeah. Anyway, and we also have the fact that all this stuff, fentanyl, military communications, AI, it's all like they went over and reached some agreement. Nothing is going to be in our favor. None of that's going to end up in our favor. Any agreements that were made between Xi Jinping and Biden means that we lost on that agreement. I mean, I don't even have to know that. I'm just going to say it. Like, all 3 were outcomes the United States has sought from China rather than the other way around, said 2 people briefed on the trip. Oh, okay. They got me, right? Yeah, no. Okay. But Xi appeared to have achieved his own aims, earning U.S. policy concessions in exchange for promises of cooperation and easing of bilateral tensions that will allow more focus on economic growth and a chance to woo foreign investors who increasingly shun China. Look, this is all just part of the deal. This is the dog and pony show. This is charades. And what's happening on the ground in our country is the actual battle. And those people are just putting on a show because they don't know what else to do. They got to keep the curtain up, right? What happens to a thief that never gets caught? They steal, right? 100%. Let's see here. Minuteman 69, MREs, and that's just leftovers? In many ways, you're not wrong. But you know, I don't really do leftovers. And no, I don't get rid of my leftovers. I don't throw them away. I just eat a lot. I don't know about you guys, but I have been working really hard to be in very good physical shape. And I've actually gained like 20 pounds since you guys probably saw me like really thin. But let's just say I can lift a lot of heavy stuff now. Okay. So yeah, I don't really leave leftovers. It's just, I'm like voracious. I can't even help myself. But I figured I need to be strong and capable for whatever might be coming. And I think being too skinny was actually kind of hurting my ability because I couldn't have the endurance required to get through some of the workouts that I do now. So check this out. Okay. You know, all these people who are involved with all this CCP, 5th generation warfare level operation of destabilization, chaos, and just full-on disruption, all of them could be easily found and brought to justice very easily. This is an article from today, okay, from Wired. Secretive White House surveillance program gives cops access to trillions of U.S. phone records. A Wired analysis of leaked police documents verifies that a secretive government program is allowing federal, state, and local law enforcement to access phone records of Americans who are not suspected of a crime. I mean, we knew they could do this, and we knew they were doing this, but this is just verifying that this is actually the case. A little-known surveillance program tracks more than 1 trillion domestic phone records within the United States each year, according to a letter Wired obtained that was sent by U.S. Senator Ron Wyden to the Department of Justice on Sunday, challenging the program's legality. I would think it's not very legal. According to the letter, a surveillance program now known as Data Analytical Services has for more than a decade allowed federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies to mine the details of Americans' calls, analyzing the phone records of countless people who are not suspected of any crime, including victims, Using a technique known as chain analysis, the program targets not only those in direct phone contact with a criminal suspect, but anyone with whom those individuals have been in contact with as well. Oh, great. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to give you a little example here of where this has happened before. Okay. I had a good one here. Where are you at? Well, now I am missing it. Anyway, I had it all set up, and of course now it's gone on me. But basically, they were using this in ways to track criminals, and then they would access people's girlfriend's phone, their mom's phone. Here you go. In one instance, an officer with the Oakland Police Department asked for a hemisphere analysis to identify the phone number of a suspect by analyzing the calls of the suspect's close friends. In another, a San Jose law enforcement officer asked the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center to identify a victim and material witness in an unspecified case. One officer soliciting information from AT&T under the program wrote, "We obtained 6 months of cell data for a suspect's phone, as well as several close associations, his girlfriend, father, sister, and mother. Those records do not indicate how AT&T responds to every request." So they can do this. We knew they could do this. We knew they were doing this, right? But this should also let you know that they can find these people. The extremist instigators, the paid bad actors, the people who are funding these organizations and have ties to the CCP and are operating in this way in order to destabilize the United States, all of these people are easily tracked and found out. Easily. Oh, they make one call to some idiot and that person answers or whatever, and then the police can track that call back to the other person, and it's this whole data chain analysis that they can use. And of course, nothing's happening, right? So I don't know what they want in the sense of, trying to stop some of this from occurring in our country, but they're not. They're purposely not stopping it, which should tell you what level of compromisation we constantly have here, right? Now, the other thing I want to mention is that we also know who they consider to be the problem, okay? New Jan 6 videos released launching wild conspiracies from the far right, okay? This is not the narrative you're getting from these other organized protests. This is not the narrative you're getting from these CCP-funded activities that are occurring. But this is where we're at. So, in case you weren't aware, they released all the video footage of J6, and there's a lot of questions to be had. And the committee egregiously decided not to release this information throughout their whole trial period. So, there's a lot of problems here with this. And this kind of shows you exactly where things are heading and how they're crafting the narrative and how this division and destabilization is going to further split things apart. And in their opinion, I'm sure the best thing they can hope for is full-on catastrophic scenario, because then they win, okay? Right-wing loyalists of former President Donald Trump are using newly released footage of the January 6 Capitol riots to further a debunked narrative that law enforcement orchestrated the attacks in order to distract from election fraud. The latest far-right conspiracy intended to downplay Trump supporters' role in the insurrection. I am reading a Forbes article from, November 19th, 2023. This is not my words, just so the platform is aware of that. House Speaker Mike Johnson publicly released 90 hours of new footage of the riots on Friday, making good on a promise he made during his campaign for Speaker, as Trump allies in Congress have repeatedly called for all the tapes to be made public, claiming they will prove rioters were wrongly convicted. Right-wing social media users are amplifying questionable interpretations of some of the clips, claiming they show law enforcement officials helping the rioters storm the Capitol, with some FBI officials acting as insurrectionists, coining the term Fedsurrection. One video that's making the rounds on Twitter shows convicted rioter Kevin Lyons walking through a security checkpoint in the Capitol while raising an object in his hand that far-right social media users, including Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, claim is a law enforcement badge, though it's unclear what he's holding, and some have argued it's actually a vaping device. Greene and others called on Johnson to create a new January 6th committee to reinvestigate the Capitol attacks, insisting, "I've said it all along, MAGA did not do this," okay? Look, and I didn't say that, that's what she said. I have to say that because of where we're talking about this right now. Senator Mike Lee also retweeted the clip and said he can't wait to ask FBI Director Christopher Wray about this at the next House Oversight Committee hearing. Listen, that, of course, the additional footage and the additional information is valuable to everyone because we should just be aware of everything that occurred in order to completely understand, right? Don't be surprised to find out that even this type of activity has ties to foreign adversaries because it creates more of that destabilization and more of that divide, right? And so if it can be used as a way to divide further, regardless of the validity of it and regardless of the justification of it, if it can be used for division, they will try to leverage it. And so you have to keep that in mind when we're going through these motions. It's not just one side per se, let's just say. For them, it doesn't matter which side does what. For them, it's what provides the best results. What is going to create the most chaos and disruption. And these people who are funding all of this and who are bankrolling it, they're your enemy. I don't know what else to say, you know, and that's they don't want America to be America. I guess that's the best way for me to put it. So, and you know what? A huge portion of the population doesn't. And just so everyone's very clear here, when I say someone's your enemy, I just mean that you need to know and be aware of what it is they're up to. That's all I mean by that. But it is something that we should be concerned about because these people, as time goes on and as things deteriorate, are likely to, you know, be part of something larger. And so just like in your local area, if you're concerned about somebody new, if you're concerned about a strange activity, if you're concerned about you know, an uptick in crime or whatever it might be, that's where you should be notating some of these individuals or groups or entities that might be involved with this new scenario unfolding in your area. And that gives you more information to work with if that ever grows or escalates to something more egregious, which I've been saying that word a lot lately, so you're welcome. But you have to approach things at the local level, but this is how we approach them at the national level as well. And the reason we analyze what's going on at the national level is in order to not be caught off guard when things suddenly turn into what we've been talking about this whole time, right? And so if we're suddenly seeing like almost, let's just call it like a civil conflict type scenario, we know what some of those driving forces are. Like we're aware of where it's coming from and we're aware of who is leading the charge, right? So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page so that we can be properly prepared for whatever comes next. I mean, I can't tell you that. I don't have a crystal ball. If the mic sounds quiet tonight, it's because I'm not loud, I guess. Everything is just messing with me when it comes to this stuff, man. I'm doing my best here, okay? All right, and I do want to mention I do have the members only live stream coming on here in just a little bit. It starts at 9:45 Central Standard Time, and that's going to be for Subscribe members as well as YouTube channel members. So if you want to be part of the private event tonight, come hang out. I just put the link to the Subscribe in the live chat. It's $5 a month. There's exclusive content. Sometimes I just say some of the stuff I'm feeling that I don't want to necessarily like publicly produce or whatever, and then people sometimes unsubscribe, I guess. So it is what it is. But at the same time, you know, the chats on Monday nights are just casual format, hanging out in the chat. you guys ask me questions or I just, start going off on a tangent. It's whatever. It's more of a way for me to say thank you. So if you're a channel member or a Subscribe Star member, I'll see you in about 7 minutes. If you're just here for the live stream tonight, I appreciate you. If you guys don't mind doing a like, subscribe, a share, or any of those things that YouTube says I'm supposed to be telling you to do, it does help. So I will say that, and I do appreciate it. And the support that I get here is amazing. So listen, I just try to give you information that's reasonable in the sense of it affecting you directly, right? I don't know where you live. I don't know how close you are to some of these events, but what I do know is that the majority of you is America, are Americans, and which means you are America. But at the same time, we've got to watch out for each other. Because we need to keep this country like what it's meant to be, and we're so far from that now that it's hard to see that as being possible in the future. But I still want to live in a constitutional United States of America. Like that's my goal. That should be your goal. And if we have that common goal, we can work together to try to make sure that maintains its existence, right? But we have to know who's trying to make that not possible. We have to know who's trying to make that not a reality. And some of these people are literally the problem. So I appreciate every single one of you. I really do. If you need anything else from me at all, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.